I'm Judith Monroe, and this is my studio. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a little tiny book that I like to call a faux codex book. So faux as in fake, and codex as in the kind of structure that we typically think of as a book. So this hard back, hard cover, and inside are a bunch of pages in a text block that are actually a lot of little signatures. So groups of pages that are sewed together sort of like a pamphlet book, all put together and sewn together. It's a fairly complex structure to build, but this one that I'm making today is actually pretty simple. But it's made differently. This is a particularly good structure to make if you're one of my photo students and you're looking for a nice structure to make for your photo book final project, because it's actually designed so that there's space to accommodate photographs being put onto the pages, where when you look at the book right now with nothing in it, it can be smaller on this side. So if you put photographs on those pages, it would still lay fairly flat, as opposed to some books, there's no space built into it. And if you put photographs on all of the pages, the book would kind of sit like this. So it's built pretty good for, it's like designed for holding things like photographs. This is kind of like what we're going to be making, not exactly, but a similar idea. And this is a book that I made. It's got that same sort of space built into it. I'll show you how that space is built in later. But this is a lot like the structure. So it's going to be fun and amazingly simple. You will be so surprised. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the different supplies that we're using today. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about and using is bookboard. So bookboard is a lot like a thin, heavyweight cardboard. You can find bookboard online at some art supply stores. The difference between bookboard and something that we call chipboard, so this is also kind of like some cardboard used in packaging. This is very heavyweight and strong. Bookboard is also specifically constructed so that if it gets wet, like glue all over the side of it, it won't warp or buckle. So it's special. If you can get it, it makes your book better. Fairly certain this is also archival and regular chipboard is not, which means it'll last a long time. But if you can't get your hands on it, don't freak out. You definitely don't want to use corrugated cardboard. Definitely want something heavy and hard. This paper here is lightweight handmade paper, about the thickness of wrapping paper, so it's fairly thin and flexible. You can also get this at different art supply places. Again, actual wrapping paper can work really well for this purpose. And this is actual wrapping paper. So these two things are going to be the outside cover of our book. This is going to make the end pages, like in this one, these plain red here, that's where this wrapping paper is going to go. This red pattern is going to be where that blue is going to be. Okay, so wrapping paper, this is just a really pretty wrapping paper I found once upon a time in a craft store, probably. Nothing super special about it. These are my notes to myself, my plans, because I always have to have a plan. This is kind of like heavyweight cardstock as far as the weight of the paper is. It's not really lightweight paper. You could use watercolor paper Like this might be watercolor paper, and this one maybe a heavy drawing paper. This is kind of a smooth, heavy drawing paper. I like to use different kinds of art papers. This book here, that paper is definitely a fairly, not super stiff, but a fairly strong watercolor paper. Watercolor paper makes nice pages, especially for photo books. Oh yeah, glue. Pretty much your standard washable, archival maybe. I usually try to find archival, but don't freak out. A ruler. I will definitely be using my ruler too. And oh, you might have noticed that's Sparky. She's not super important for bookmaking, but nice to have around. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to create my text block, but I have to think about size when I do that. So if you'll notice here, these pages are just slightly smaller, like kind of in about 1/8 of an inch all the way around from these, my covers. So this is going to be my covers right now. And when I look at this, 2 3/4, and not quite 2 3/4. So if I come in 1/4 of an inch in, that's 2.5 by 2.5, and then I'll have pages that are just small enough to kind of fit inside. I don't want to try to make my pages come all the way out to the edge because it's really hard. Then they'll want to peek out maybe from behind my cover. So if I make sure that they're just a little bit smaller, then I'm not going to have them peeking out. So that's my thought process here. So I have my paper here that's already the right size to make, oh yeah, perfectly, 7.5 inches. So I'm just going to make some marks, 2.5 and 5 there, and 2.5 and 5 here. I'm going to show you a really cool way to cut paper. So you could at this point use an X-Acto or draw a line and scissors. I really like to just tear pages. I like the kind of slightly rough edge it gives. This is a nice sharp-edged metal ruler, so it actually helps me tear pretty well. So I'm going to be creating several pages and then several hinges that go between the pages. So each one of these pages is separate, and this book has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. And depending on how much paper I've given myself, I might do that. Might get a little bit extra. So if I have 8 pages, these are just a little hinge that I've glued in between, so that's the same height as the page. So like it'll come up from one of these strips, but it's much narrower. Like this is just about 1/2 inch wide, so that's a pretty good deal. And I want one less. So with 8 pages, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hinges. So I have it written out on my, this is why I write things down. So here I have, out of this sheet of paper, I've planned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages, and then 10 1/2-inch strips. So that'd still give me 1 hinge more. That'll be pretty perfect. So as long as this is 10 inches, these strips are 10 inches, and I didn't mess myself up that way. And look, it's slightly more than 10, so that's a good deal. And I have this handy board that actually gives me little marks. So that's my 10 inches. And 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10. And since I've got everything lined up on this grid, so this is part of the process of making a book, is measuring and making sure that things are gonna fit together right. In that way, it's kind of like woodworking or building cabinets, I imagine, where you better make sure that you measure so that everything fits together when you're done. So that's 5 of my pages, and I'll just do a little bit, another, no, that's only 4 of my pages. Sometimes I can't count. So, working on this other set here. Again, 2.5, 5, 7.5. There's 8 pages, and now I'm gonna do it a little bit different. So this last one I'm gonna make so the way I figured it out, I can make 2.5, 5, and then a half inch, half, half inch. So I'm just making a little half-inch mark everywhere here for my hinges, and that'll give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. And I really need 9, so having an extra is not a bad thing. So get my little scrap piece there. So these are going to be my hinges. And then I'll show you how I'm going to put these together in just a minute. You're going to be kind of surprised how easy this goes together. This is kind of the measuring part is probably one of the hardest parts. Just making sure everything fits together, because the assembly is pretty simple. And I am just going to use whatever glue stick. There's also special glue that they make called PVA glue, and it's completely archival, and it also helps prevent buckling and warping of papers when it dries. That's a really big thing. In general, we don't want our books to be all wiggly and warped when we're done with them, and a lot of our glues that we use can cause that. Glue sticks aren't bad because they don't have as much moisture in them. So I have made a lot of books with glue sticks, and that's worked out really well. I think that was the last. Nope, one more strip. I'm sure you can't see my little tiny pencil marks, but okay, and then these are my last 2 pages. Okay, so now I'm ready to start assembling my pages. I've got 10 pages here, 10 hinges, which is more than I need. I'm going to bring this piece of scratch paper here because I don't want to get glue on everything on my nice cutting board. So now I'm going to use my glue stick. I'm just going to completely coat this hinge on one side. so that it's got all gluey. And I'm gonna use it to hold, so my 2 pages that are here, I'm just going to literally use it to hinge together. So just make sure that that's one good piece there. Okay, I'm gonna let it dry before I start to fold it, but I'm just gonna do this 5 more times. So this is easiest to do when you have an even number of pages. You could make it work out in the end, but the way I'm putting this book structure together, it's going to be way easier to do with an even number. So again, another hinge, holding those 2 pages really close to each other so that they're together, using this hinge to hold them together. Now you might be wondering, why did I tear this paper apart just to be gluing it back together? And that's because I want to actually create this space where I have a page and then this hinge, so that it creates, this is how we're creating the space for a photograph in this final book structure. Because when I fold these hinges, they like create a little space in between the pages, and it's in that space that a photograph is going to be able to sit. So again, just each one of these little pairs together. A little repetitive, but not hard. Okay, holding it together, gluing. A little extra glue on my fingers. Oh well. All right, here's the last pair. Now I still have plenty of little hinges. Which is good. Come back together. So that wanted to come apart a little bit. All right, so now I'll let those dry. I'll start with the pair that are drier. So now I'm actually going to fold these in half. You can start to see how that hinge that is creating a little space in between those pages. So I'm just going to fold these 2. And now I'm going to glue these 2 pairs together with another hinge. And since these are the same height, that makes it really easy to do this. I am going to come up to a point where I'll have not quite as easy as a task, but it'll be all right. So now I've got those pair, that pair, I'm going to let those sit there. And I'm going to do the same with the next pair. So folding this in half. And so I'm doing it so I'm folding the hinge on the inside of the pair. That's pretty important. So there's a hinge on the inside of every pair. together here. So now I have these two pairs, which I would normally want to put together, but then I've got an extra helps it to dry a little bit. And I did not let that dry long enough, so it's not going to want to stay. It is pretty cool that glue sticks do generally dry pretty fast. Sometimes not fast enough. All right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this single, and it's not going to want to lay exactly right. If I pull this up here to kind of give space, kind of makes these two the same height. I'm going to glue these together. This one that I folded, that I want to make sure that I keep my hinges in the middle. Okay, I'll let that one sit for a minute. So then I just want to put these two blocks together. So fold this one this way. So again, I have one that's a little bit taller. If I flip this way, then I can make them the same height. So I'm just kind of using one of the pages underneath to put so that these things are at the same height to make my job a little bit easier of gluing these pages together. One last hinge. Flip that one around. So now I'm going to let that dry for just a moment. Be kind of careful how I fold it. I could use the ruler to kind of crease it. Doesn't want to cooperate with me. So that's just to make you feel better. When things don't go quite right, just know that, you know, sometimes that's how it works. So it helps to just kind of let that dry. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close. You'll see this is like this inside part. I just glued together all of these little pages. So I have, this is the end paper, but I'm just building these pages here. This little text block. So each of this is a page with a little hinge in the middle. Okay, so that's what I'm creating right here. I'm just being a little impatient as far as the drying process goes. There we go. So now I'm going to build my cover, and I want to make sure that my cover gives me space for the thickness of my text block. So that's what this little thing is called, is a text block. And so I'm going to use this text block to help me put together my cover. This is my cover, so these are 2.5 inch squares. I made sure that the paper that is going to be the outside of my cover, it's going to hold everything together, is a fair amount bigger. This is probably, it's bigger than it really needs to be. It could just be like 1/4 of an inch bigger, top and bottom, but I wanted to make sure there was plenty of space here because this width for these two things is got to be determined by the width of the text block. So if you're hearing funny noises, that's my dog snoring, because there's Sparky on the couch here and my other dog is under the table, and they're both snoring. Poor things. So if you're hearing weird little noises, that's my dog snoring. So I'm just making little pencil marks on this so that, because I'm gonna glue this and I want to make sure that I lay my book boards back in the right place. And actually, when I do this, I actually want to give it just a little extra space. Now that I remember, it's got to be this width in between. So I want to give each one a little bit more space, just about 1/8 of an inch, to account for the back side, this thickness of the board. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick board. So as long as I can see my little marks there, I'm good. I'm good there. So my handy glue stick, and I'm just gonna put a really good strong coating on one side of my book board here. And flip it over here. Okay. I'll press that in just a minute to make it more. I'm going to do the same thing here. Plenty of glue. Put it over here. I have an extra gob of glue. If I leave that glue, oh, I want these things to be lined up. So I'm making sure that it's lined up here, this way. See how it's not quite? So I want that to be straight and level so that my book goes together well. Okay, and I'm just gonna make sure that this is all nice and smooth from this side. It's all in there nice and flat. Now I'm ready to wrap it around this way. So I'm just going to kind of do a real simple fold here. The first thing I'm gonna do, and I can do this with a lot less, but it won't hurt it to have more. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just put glue on the corner here. And fold it back this way. So I'm going to do this to all 4 corners. So remember, this is fairly lightweight, thin paper. If you choose too heavy of a paper for this, it's not going to be, it's going to give you some trouble. So sort of like doing a little bit of gift wrap. You're going to see I'm just kind of just wrapping this paper all around the book board. You can also do this with fabric. They have book binding fabric that's got a special backing on it so that it's kind of stiff enough, strong enough to handle being wrapped like this without stretching. So now that I've got all 4 corners glued, now I'm just going to glue these edges. So a neat trick that I was taught when I was learning how to make books for the first time is I just kind of pull this and press it down, and that makes sure that this gets wrapped around the edge of this book board really well. So a good coating of glue. And I'm just kind of pushing it into these grooves here. Watching that I don't put the other side of my book into my little glob of glue. Glue on the edge there. See how nice and neat, starting to look a lot like a little package. Wrapping that there. Okay, I'm gonna flip this around so that I don't lay anything else in wet glue. But now you can see now I've got my cover and my text block. I'm testing that it's all fitting together. Look at that, it's so cute. Okay, so now what I need is I need to make sure that I make these end papers. So this is this inside paper that I'm creating now. So I want to make sure that it's 2.5 inches tall. And so I'm gonna get 2 strips that are 2.5 inches tall, maybe by 5 inches, but I'll see. I'm gonna leave it longer to see how long I want it to be so that it comes all the way out. Because my book board is like, there is a little bit more of a gap here, which is not a super big deal. As long as the pages aren't longer, it's all good. So I'm going to get my 2 strips of, tear off my 2 strips. I love these little butterflies that are here. So 2.5 is this line here. So this gives me, and remember I chose 2.5 inches because I knew that my pages are 2.5 inches. Okay, so there's 1 strip. I want to do 2.5 inches from this side because I like the pretty little butterfly there. Let's see, so if I do it this way, that spot. So if I didn't have this grid here, I would definitely be measuring 2.5 inches from here to here. But that is something that having this grid on this cutting mat saves me from, which is also saves you from watching me do it. All right, so let's do this one here. So I'm gonna kind of measure. Actually, I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna fold this part here. So I'm gonna glue these 2 things together here. I'm gonna leave this longer, figure out what the length is of that in a minute. And I'm gonna do this as well. So just fold this. So when I glue this, I want to be able to coat this all in glue and not get glue on everything. So I'm slipping my scratch paper in between these 2 pages. So now I can coat this page with glue without worrying about getting it all over my other pages, which is pretty cool because I would totally do that. So coating this with glue here. And then putting my end paper here. Okay, so that's one. And then I'm going to do it on this side. Coating this with glue. You can already see where the spine, that's this end where everything's glued together, is much thicker than the body of the text, so it's got plenty of space to insert photos there. And I love how that little butterfly sits right there. It's pretty cool. And there's extra glue. Okay. So now I'm ready to test where these end pages should end. So I'm just going to kind of mark where it kind of comes in. It's a little tricky to kind of play with everything and hold it in place. So I can see how this is fitting. So this is where that one's going to be. It's going to be just beautiful. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to flip it because it will make my life easier. Because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you do it the opposite way. Oh, sad, the little birds don't get to be there. Just its butt. Oh well. All right, so now I'm going to do kind of a similar sort of thing that I just did with the text block. I'm going to coat this end paper here. If I were using a liquid glue, so like the PVA is a liquid glue like Elmer's, I would be putting it in a little dish and using a paintbrush to put it on, to paint the page with glue. Okay, so I want to be really careful about laying this down in just the right place. And then I'm going to rotate it around and do the same here. And inserting my scratch paper. Getting this all coated. You'll see I kind of stand my text block up to glue this in here. And I close it, and look at that. My cute little faux Codex book with lots of space to put photographs into. Isn't that cute? That wanted to get glued. So I'll go together and make sure that no extra glue is kind of gotten spilled over. But now I've got this lovely little faux Codex book. So I'll show you, I'll review the different things that we used. And you can totally make one of these yourself. Just like that. Isn't that crazy? Crazy how easy that is. It's made. And I just want to remind you, it was made with book board, which is like a really heavy cardboard. I used lightweight handmade paper for the outside cover, but I could have used something like wrapping paper. I'd probably use really nice wrapping paper, or really fun, I don't know. And then for the inside end papers, I used wrapping paper. And then for the pages themselves, that's a fairly heavy cardstock paper, simply because I want to make pages that are sturdy enough to hold a photograph. So, I'm Judith Monroe, and I just showed you how to make a little tiny faux Codex book. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my channel. Thanks.